Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today is going to be a very quick review of Salt and Broom by Sharon Lynn Fisher. This was a book that I got because it was supposed to be a Jane Eyre retelling, but the premise being that in this retelling, Jane Eyre is a witch. So I was ready to buy in. I love Jane Eyre. If you know, if you've been watching my videos, hang on. Here's one. I have a few copies of Jane Eyre. I love this book, read it many times. One of my favorite classics, one of my favorite all-time books, it's in the top 5. And I was ready though. I like retellings. I love fairy tale retellings, and I think that they can work, definitely. Some work much better than others, and that would be the case with this one because it did not work for me. But I'll show you, this is Heartstone. This is a Pride and Prejudice reimagining, I would say is a better word. And this is basically Pride and Prejudice with dragons. And I was all about it. I have to reread this soon, but I read this as a buddy read a few years ago and really enjoyed it. And it had enough of the Pride and Prejudice, had the same characters, but enough of the same speeches and words, very similar, that it felt like you could kind of just buy in. Oh yeah, sure. If Mr. Darcy lived in a time with dragons, that he'd be like that. I'll go with it. However, I feel like this book, Salt and Broom, didn't work well with the characters it was trying to use for its retelling. I think this book should have just been its own thing. It should have not used Jane Eyre, Mr. Rochester, this very familiar setting of Thornfield and everything going on there to try and set up this witch version of Jane. If it would have just been a girl who was a witch and, similar circumstances, that are presented in the book, I would have bought in. But to me, it's every time she would mention something that I thought would have worked so much better in just a regular story versus the story she's telling as a Jane Eyre retelling, it took me right out of it. I didn't connect with the characters on the level of, oh, these are reimagined characters that I know. I already know these characters. I'm already connected to them in some way. This is just a reimagining of these same people. She changes a lot that doesn't help her, and I will get into it all really quickly as I can. So there will be spoilers throughout. This would be a 2.5-star review if I'm being very generous, because to me, the writing was fine, not amazing, but I feel like I feel like I want to be generous with this because I don't know if this was one of her first books or whatever, but it was just it felt very first draft to me, the way that she wrote it. And there was things where I feel like if someone would have read it and said, hey, just change that, it doesn't, work as well, or changes a little bit, it could have been a lot better. It has a very odd magic system that's powers that Jane has, as a witch, are never fully explored. It has a very, very weak romance that is very underdeveloped. And for a Jane Eyre retelling, which is heavy on the romance and connection between Jane and Mr. Rochester, you have to buy in because there is some stuff happening in that book that really derails that romance train. But I'm still on it. So you can love it or hate him. I love Mr. Rochester, and I always just view him as a villain. And I just, that's how I get away with it. Because I'm yeah, he's pretty much a villain. But I don't mind it. So this book is Jane Eyre now at Lowood School, and a letter has come requesting a Lowood witch to come to Thornfield to help with a unexplained problem. That's our setup. And it's very much, like I said, we don't know much about her. She's a teacher. She's teaching medical, I guess herbal healing. Is it herbal or herbal? Because they were saying herbal, and I was so confused. Let me know in the comments, is it herbal or herbal? It was so frustrating. So she's teaching that, and she's teaching healing and all that at the school. And she is aged up in this book, which does not help her. She's aged up to the point where in this book, instead of being the young, naive 18-year-old governess, she is a 30-year-old experienced witch. She's 30. I'm in my 30s, and I did not relate to her as I was oh, I don't see you as someone being my age. She seemed very young, very inexperienced. And yes, she's been at this school her whole life, but also there's just things you would understand as a 30-year-old that an 18-year-old wouldn't understand. So when she gets the job to go to help Mr. Rochester, she's very much like, has an attitude about it because Mr. Brocklehurst, who's another character brought over from the books, she really is very choosy about who she brings over. Mr. Brocklehurst in the book Jane Eyre is a villain character. He's basically runs the school. He's very harsh. He's very mean to the students. He treats them as basically they're receiving generosity because they're being cared for, but nothing else. Like he's not giving them anything extra. They're basically starving. They're receiving nothing. Whereas he lives with his family, well off, wealthy. He's doing very good for himself, and he doesn't really care. He's not a compassionate person. He's very much like a villain character and a hypocrite. And it's very much pointed out in the book that he is like in contrast to all of the good people who want to help. There's some people that say that they're generous, good people and don't want to help and just are trying to benefit themselves. So that's that character. In this book, he is just the head of the school. He's not really fond of witches, and he kind of is upset that the school is kind of known to be a school for witches, but he just kind of goes along with it because reasons. So she gets the letter to go help Mr. Rochester. And he tells her, she's like, why should I do this? And he's like, well, because the school needs money. We have, do you think that the school has an indefinite amount of money? And she's 30. And she's like literally thinking, oh, it never occurred to me that money could run out, like that Lowood would run out of money. An 18-year-old might just think, money happens. Money is just available. But a 30-year-old in the real world, in this world, would have understood the concept of money. And that money is not just it doesn't just happen. You don't just have the money all the time. So I could not. I was already like, okay, no. So she goes, she meets Mr. Rochester. Their first meeting is very similar to the book, Jane Eyre. But the language is different, which is odd. I would have kept it very similar because it's enough different to where I was like, oh no, it's not, it doesn't mesh. Something's off. And I don't know why she did that. I would have had none of this because it just doesn't help her, because every time she tries to establish these characters as being from Jane Eyre, I don't buy it. So Mr. Rochester meets her, he gets thrown off his horse, and they have their first meeting, and she helps him to get back to the house, and it's like, oh, there's Mr. Rochester. So the whole problem that they're having is very mysterious happenings. There's been sightings. There's been, people are hearing, singing. There's nothing like little accidents have happened, but nothing crazy. And so in this book, spoiler, Mr. Rochester's wife is already dead. In the original Jane Eyre, she's not dead. She's living happily up in the attic because she's insane. This book I love Jane Eyre. I love it. I'm sorry. It's so good. When that twist hit, I was like, whoa. And the original Jane Eyre does a much better job of building up it's a gothic romance. It has suspense. It has this overwhelming sense of dread that something bad is happening. You have very mysterious people like Mrs. Poole, who's helping, but she's also she lives there in the house. Her role is kind of unexplained. She's very sinister. She has a very creepy laugh that Jane hears multiple times, and people, and it's not her laugh, it's the mad wife. But, you have that thing where you have that sense of there's something really creepy kind of going on behind the scenes at Thornfield. Whereas this book, where there is actually something creepy going on, and they have to establish this supernatural, connection to whatever's going on. There's no creep factor. I was never afraid. I never had any kind of fear. This, just did a terrible job of establishing, that something bad was happening. But where the book really lost me was when, spoiler, Jane has a cat that's living around her little cottage. She's staying there on the, estate, and she's trying to figure out what's going on. She's kind of interacting with the servants, doing interviews, trying to figure out, what is this really, a spirit? Is it a ghost? She believes it's the ghost of Mr. Rochester's dead wife, but she's trying to establish that for sure. And there's a cat hanging around. Well, one day she follows the cat into the woods, and the cat transforms into a tree spirit, a dryad, I believe, and then reveals that she is, in fact, Jane's mother. I was, floored in a bad way. I'm like, well, that is a twist I did not see coming. Her mother is a tree spirit, and get this, Mr. Brocklehurst is her father. Mr. Brocklehurst had a relationship at some point with a tree spirit, and that is who Jane is. Okay. See, this is why I'm like, this could all work, not in Jane Eyre. Like, please don't do this to me. I was I'm so baffled by these choices. Like, this could have just been a story about a witch who has like her first job and she's an orphan and like, I could have liked this book, but I just, as a Jane Eyre retelling, I'm like, no. Like, there is a bridge too far with this. And also, I just didn't connect with Jane or Mr. Rochester. The changes to their character, as far as like Jane in the book, is very, very much established in the beginning. She is headstrong. She is mouthy. She will just say things. She has a quick temper. And then as she grows up, she has to deal with that. And she like has it under control. But she's never like acts inferior to Mr. Rochester. She is never timid. She's quiet. She like holds herself back from saying things at times. But it's all like, she's not acting like, oh, I don't know what to say. I don't want to offend. Like, she doesn't care. And the difference here is that in this book, because she's been told, like, you need this money or the school might, have to close. We really need to make sure we're bringing money in. Duh. She's very timid in the beginning with Mr. Rochester. She acts very like, oh, I'm so unsure what to say. And so her coming off as like a 30-year-old woman who's apparently a very experienced witch doesn't really translate, because she comes off very timid, very like unsure of her own abilities, and she comes off like definitely like Mr. Rochester is her superior, and also Mr. Rochester smiled way too much. I was like, no, he's not like jolly, he's not like smiling all the time, he's not happy, he's brooding, he's dark, he's got stuff going on. There's more than meets the eye with Mr. Rochester, and I just no, none of that was there. And the romance was so forced, because in the original Jane Eyre, she's there for a long time. She lives there. He goes and does other stuff. She like lives there for a while, and he leaves, comes back, they meet, they talk, she saves his life. All this stuff happens over a longer period of time. Whereas this is like, I want to say maybe 2 weeks at the longest, where they fall in love. And I did not buy that they were in love. So, like, I'm rushing this book. But, okay, so, like, the tree spirit is her mother. Mr. Brocklehurst is her father. And the spirit is obviously, like, revealed to be, there's no mystery here. Like, all of it is what it seems. It's her, the dead wife, come back. And it's not really the dead wife in control, which was another thing that, like, she didn't really establish. There's kind of a mention of her seeing a portrait. But at the very end, it's like, it wasn't really the dead wife in control all along. The spirit of this ancestor from way back when, who was burned as a witch, came back and possessed the dead wife through reasons, which I will not get into. But it's so, like, last minute. And the main romance happens between Jane and Mr. Rochester while they're literally hiding in her cottage. He's been wounded. And, like, the evil spirit is searching for them outside. Like, they can be found at any time and be in trouble, but like they've, got their wards up, so they're okay. And it's like, okay, now's our time to kiss and like have our moment. Like, thankfully, no intimate times. Like I could not. I was like, do not try and force that right now. You have not established. Like, I'm shocked you feel like you've established enough for them to be like kissing, because this relationship has not relationshiped to this point. So yeah, that was Salt and Broom. I'm not going to get into like all the details of the book. This is like an overview. It was so weird. I wanted to really like it because I think that it could have worked. And I wish that she would have just changed the names. Like, I could have bought anybody, Jane so-and-so and Mr. so-and-so, at any estate where there could be a spirit that's come back, or like, his dead wife, really did, come back in a spirit and she's upset, and, things has to be dealt with. Like, I could have bought into that, but I didn't buy into it, the Jane Eyre retelling, and I just really wanted it to be good, because I think you have to like fully commit. Because I wish you would have just like used more from the actual books, and aging Jane up and then making her less strong, more timid, less capable seeming did not work. And then making Mr. Rochester like nicer and more friendly and more like all this. I'm like, no, the dynamic of their relationship is not like that. And then there was none of that like longing, and like Jane and him have like such a good dynamic of like him always being at the point of like maybe going too far with like, she's a governess, he's like, obviously a wealthy man, and in that society like they wouldn't have really mixed, but like he's always wants to talk to her. He does like hold her hand. There's like this whole buildup of like, is he interested in her? Is he using her? What's really going on? Does he have feelings for her? And you feel it. And then when like the revelation of like him being in love with her, you buy it. But no. And I know Jane Eyre for a lot of people is problematic. I get it. And I can see the like desire to fix it with like, oh no, here's a more modern spin where she's a 30-year-old woman. She's not 18. He's not much older than her. She's got this more modern sensibilities where she's, she's working for him, like not in a position of like a governess. She's got her own thing. She's a witch and she's very like well respected. And I understand, but I didn't buy it. And I think the problem is that like when you use a fairy tale, usually these are just like outlines of a character. So it works because you can say the Little Mermaid can have any personality. She can have any kind of desire. She can have what her likes and dislikes are. Her personality is very much not fully explored in the book, just like Sleeping Beauty, Cinderella. These are like an outline of a character. And then you can explore her character. Is Cinderella very sweet? Is she, resentful? Is she happy to, do her chores and be just, working for her, stepmother, stepsisters? Or is she really sad? Does she want to find true love? Does she want to like, what are her dreams? What are her aspirations? With Jane Eyre, this is not Jane Eyre is a big book. Jane Eyre is fully explored. We know her character. We know Mr. Rochester's character. She gets a whole beginning of her life, her childhood. We go through her like defining moments, things that shaped her as a person. And then it's like, nope, she's not like that anymore. And I think that's why it doesn't work. Like you can take strong character and, have them be just, strong character over here. But if you have a fully developed character that has their own traits, personality, and things that really, really define them, and then you try and like say, well, no, in this, she's this way. In this, she's this way. It just like, it didn't work for me. Because I wanted her to be like Jane Eyre, but as a witch, as someone who is, has like this skill and she's very, like competent that way. But I didn't feel like she was. I felt like she was a lesser character. I apologize for the really rambling review. I was trying to get this book finished, but once again, I thought like, I'm going to get through this book so quickly, and then it immediately like put me in another slump. So I didn't get much reading done the last few days, weeks, whatever we're at now. And I'm not blaming this book, but man, I thought like this is easy. Jane Eyre, I love Jane Eyre. Like this retelling is gonna be so good. And nothing against this author. Like I don't think that the story was bad. I don't even think the story was boring. I just think that every time she tried to establish it as a Jane Eyre story, it ripped me out of the story. I'm like, I just can't buy in that Jane Eyre's mom is a dryad / cat. I'm just not there. And if I can accept that, Mr. Darcy is riding dragons, and like fighting in, against other dragons while he's riding his dragon out, and, there's all this crazy stuff happening where like dragon riders are just a thing in Pride and Prejudice, I feel like I can accept a lot. But no, not with this. Not this time. It just didn't work. So that is Salt and Broom, and I will hopefully be able to get through some more books coming up. I have no idea. My TBR is all over the place, and I'm not going to say like, oh, I'm working on this or reading this, because I have no idea what I'm going to get to. But if you are reading anything that you absolutely love, or if you have a retelling that you feel like works really well, or that you definitely recommend, let me know in the comments. I'll talk to you soon.